and a very serious situation. You have some other issues, like you talked about your asthma, and you then obviously tested positive, had a positive test for COVID-19. A very scary time for you, but you were able to get on the other side of it, and thankfully, and you were on the mend. And then you had some advice, you say, from your doctor about traveling to Florida. Why were you going to Florida? What was the point of leaving your home in Georgia and going there?
So again, to rehash this a little bit, but when I went into the hospital, I went right to the emergency room, and they spent about 8 hours on me to stabilize me. It was not until Tuesday they realized that I was going to be okay. They weren't sure that I was going to make it out of it. So it was a very severe case. By Thursday, I have a strong faith. So, I felt like Jesus grabbed my hand and said, not today. By Thursday, I had recovered and responded well enough with great medical team, which we have incredible medical people in our state. We're very blessed. That I was moved into another room with isolation. The entire time that I went in the hospital, they suspected and they started treating as if it was COVID, and I was tested. On that Saturday, I was released to come home and isolate. That night is when they said, hey, the test came back as we expected, positive, but we've been treating it for it anyway. So I was already in isolation for 5 days, 6 days at that point. To move beyond that, I have severe asthma. I treat it by trying to stay in shape. And then I have allergies, and I've taken injections almost my entire life. I still take 3 injections every month. As you know, pollen count was the second highest it's been, I think, in history this last week. And the medical team is a part of my recovery. My lungs are about 65 to 70%. Said, it would be good for you to go to a warmer climate, that salt air, continue to isolate, even though you're far beyond your 14 days. And there's an order in Florida that says anyone coming from another state, 14 days, just continue to follow that, abide. But if you come from here, from one home to the other home, we feel like your recuperation would be much quicker, much safer, and better for you. And so as part of our shelter in place, just me following medical advice, I certainly wasn't trying to draw an attention to myself.
Yeah, sorry about that. So you made the trip down there, and is this your home or just a place that you rent for vacation?
No, it's our home. It's a second home that it is on a rental program through a very large company that rents it out part of the year for us. And then we use it and have guests that use it ourselves that we don't charge. But as you know, Florida isn't a 100% ban on any vacation rentals. So it was available, will be available for a while. So it made sense. It's in an isolated area. It's a private beach. So you weren't going to encounter anyone that didn't come to us.
So when did things turn for you? You're in, you're out, right? And because I did see where the sheriff had, Sheriff Smith in Franklin County had made a Facebook post of some sort and said that he had a conversation with you when you were en route. How did all of that come about? Well,
first of all, I applaud my law enforcement. As you know, I am a huge law enforcement supporter. You have to have a passion to do that because you're underpaid and you're overworked. I was not but a couple hours away, which is spotty coverage. He did call. We had a nice conversation, I believe. He asked the question of why I would come, as many people asked. And I said, we're certainly not coming for vacation. We're coming as a part of rehab. I tried to articulate what the doctor's order said or recommendation was to him. And either he was not able to understand that or I didn't articulate it very well because it didn't come out that well in the media. But I thought we had a great conversation. I felt like it was good. And so we came in that night. Again, you check in when you come in. So that's normal. You have to check in.
Well, Senator, how did he become aware that you were en route?
It's a great question, Adam. I'm not really sure, but that's a conversation for another day. Certainly, he has 12,000 people. He's the sheriff, and he's responsible to, and he's trying to mitigate the stresses of an environment down there that's a close-knit community. We love it down there. I don't fault the sheriff. I mean, again, he's just trying to deal with citizens and calm the fears and balance what he may or may not know from the scientific community.
So one of the things that he mentioned is you were having a conversation, and then at some point the call was broken up and he didn't hear back. Is that the case?
That is true. If you travel the route, you go south from Bainbridge, there is literally no coverage for the longest period through there. You're going through a forest. You're in dead zone. And so it dropped off, and then it was getting to 9 o'clock, and I felt like I would check in with them the next morning.
Now, who all was traveling with you? And was it just your immediate family that was going there with you?
Immediate and extended family, yes. There was 3 cars. We knew we were going to be isolated for 14 days. So you can imagine you have to take a lot of food. So we packed.
Yeah. And I read or I saw where the sheriff had mentioned assigning a deputy of some sort to the home. Was that the case when you arrived?
So we arrived maybe 9 o'clock at night, right? It's about a 7-hour trip. And we were fine. We checked in, went through the gate, went to our home, unpacked, got situated, went to bed, woke up the next morning. And clearly there was some local controversy. And that was when I was made aware of there would have to be a deputy assigned. I assume, I don't know, I haven't really studied the order enough to know. I knew what my part was, but I think that's probably what you have to do, is have someone stationed there to ensure that someone complies, right? So that next morning, about maybe 9 o'clock, is when we became aware of we had a deputy that was out there.
What did you understand at that point what their big concern was, and why you would get a call from the sheriff, they would assign a deputy to the house? I mean, were you understanding clearly what their side of this was at that point, or what their major concern was? If you had been cleared by your doctor, as you say, right, and you had been recommended to get to a warmer climate with less pollen, then what was their concern?
You know, sheriff, and I have great relationships even with my sheriffs up here, right? Frank Reynolds, Warren, here, Millsap. And when you do a ride along, as you know, or you spend some time with them, they're dealing with everything from a barking dog to, in this case, the unknown. And the fears that you have in that community, I think it's human nature for people to be afraid when they don't know, and when they're getting information that are not necessarily coming from the scientific community and from the medical community, getting their news many times off of some Facebook post or social media that someone's put out there as fact. And I think that probably bubbled up, and he was in a tough spot, real tough spot. And so I tried to be sensitive to that. I tried to reassure him. I certainly did not want to put him in a tough spot or have him be focused on a resident there when there's many other things to be focused on as citizens in that county.
So the sheriff says in his Facebook post that the island had been closed and that everybody was, stores were closed, restaurants, bars, what have you, and that they were not, they were encouraging people not to come to St. George Island. Were you aware of that?
So that's an interesting post. We're in interesting times that people say some things that maybe they might not mean. The restaurants are open. They're complying just like you would here in Georgia. It's takeout and delivery only. The island is very limited on what they have as far as restaurants anyway, but they were open, right? The beaches are all the public are closed. The public beaches are closed. But residents and or maybe a second home, whether you're from Florida or from Georgia or wherever, there are people coming to their homes that are there. So it's not closed off by any means. I checked with the management company prior to coming down a few days in advance. I said, if we did do this, if we followed through with what the recommendations were, are there any restrictions or anything we need to do? And they said, just comply with what the state law is or what the order is.
So you hadn't been down there very long, but when you got down there, had you been in any contact with anybody else other than the 3 cars or caravan of family and extended family that was with you?
Personal contact, you mean?
Right. Like had you gone anywhere, to the grocery store, to a rest, anything.
Adam,
I'm curious.
we looked like a mobile Publix. I'm telling you this. My truck was full. We had plenty of toilet paper. We had meats that were frozen. We had ice. We have dog food. We had our medical. We were ready to go self-isolate and hunker down like what was required, right? So no, the answer is even the guard shack, when you pull up, he sits in a shack. The gate automatically opens for residents. You wave at him, you move on. That registers who just came in. We went right to our home. So personal contact, absolutely not. I never had any, other than the next morning. I did walk out to greet the deputies to make sure that, one is I can encourage them, two, to understand really what their orders were, and then just take into consideration what was going on as the controversy. That was the only interaction.
Yeah, I thought if you were just going there and you're not in contact with anyone, and you're going to hunker down there at that home, at your house. I guess I just didn't see what all the fuss was about. But we did get a lot of we got some emails and calls, and I've seen some of the comments online and so forth. And there were some people, and maybe you can clear the air on this. There were some that had said that you all had gotten out and went into a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, and there were others that were around and they were uncomfortable with that. Is that the case?
That is not true, sir. There are many rumors. There was a rumor that I had filed a flight pattern to fly in. I don't have a pilot's license, so that's not true. There were comments about me being escorted out of the community all the way to the state line. That is not true. I have what I understand is a very good relationship with the sheriff. Again, I applaud him for doing what his job is just trying to calm down the citizens. I let him know the next morning. I said, Sheriff, in light of all of this, in light of the order from Governor DeSantis to go to a 30-day, in light of the order that our governor is putting in place till the 13th, we feel like returning back to our home in Georgia, working with my medical team up here makes the most sense so that I can focus on Georgia, and we can together, our state, your state, and all the states together can figure out how to beat this virus. But your question, he did not get out of the car at all.
Can you repeat that? It broke up a little bit. Can you repeat that, Senator, about getting out of the car?
Yeah, the fact of the matter is we never got out of the car at all. When we traveled down, we made our trip. We complied with all the rules. And when we hit the state line, we never opened a door or a window until we got to our home.
That's good. And the final thing I think I would ask you is, again, reemphasize whether you were, at this point, contagious to others or any of your family. I mean, granted, you say you were in the car, you got into the house, you weren't in contact with anyone else that would have put anybody, at risk. But I think it's important because you told me in that text message last night that, I had been cleared. I'm no longer contagious. I don't know if anybody else in your family could have been asymptomatic or maybe asymptomatic. Who knows?
Right. This is an uncertain world right now. This virus is like many of the others. We've been through SARS, and we've been through so many that when we're going through it, we're trying to figure out, the medical team, the scientists, everyone tries to work together to see what really is going on. But it's been released, and you've read it before, that, and even our capital was, let's do a 14-day isolation. That seems to be the number, right? So I was far beyond 14 days of isolation, and so was my family of being exposed, right? So the best of our knowledge, following the professionals, is I was no longer a carrier or contagious. And I certainly was not going to go around people anyway. My plan was, hey, go and focus on recovery. Let's not draw the attention to me. Let's continue to focus on the people that maybe are struggling with this. But the reality is we don't really know, unless we tested the whole population, who is carrying right now, who has positive, because the positive story out there, if it is, Adam, is we seem to think that whoever contracts this virus, that the end is near. And the reality is we hear numbers that are out there that whatever they are, 80%, 85%, 90%, whoever, whatever the number is, will never have to actually have medical care. It will be similar to the flu. Now, there are certain people like myself that has asthma, and certainly if you had emphysema or other people, then this virus could be fatal, but that's true of anything. So we're still trying to work our way through it, but I didn't want to put anyone in harm's way. I certainly wanted to come down. I certainly, as a senator, as a father, is a good neighbor. I don't want to be the guy that is trying to draw attention or do anything outside of the ordinary. We are certainly trying to just comply with the recommendation of my medical team and go get well so that I can go back and fight the good fight. That's all I was trying to do.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much. And when you said you had family and extended family, just help me understand. In three different cars, were these your wife and your children, and did they have friends, or was this just direct immediate?
There's a family that's like a brother to me that's been involved with me in some various things, works on some security with me, and our families are intertwined and have been for months. They went through the isolation period with themselves during that time, so it was the three of us.
Okay, and so all of you
have gone to college, right? As everyone else, we're going to this new digital classroom. Yeah. They're doing schoolwork online as we travel.
And so all of you had gone through that 14-day quarantine period, right? What was when did that 14 days start for you? I guess you started that prior to getting your, well, I think you said 5 days prior to getting your positive COVID-19 test. Is that correct?
Sure. When I entered into the hospital, they immediately test, right? Because I was running the fever and so on. I was already on some antibiotics. And at that time, the test, and then the tests, and that's been the biggest challenge, not one of the biggest challenges that, our president, our governor, and our local leaders have struggled with is getting tests, right? You can't just everyone go to test. The next thing is getting the results so that they can start a treatment. As soon as I entered the hospital, they started treating me as if, because I have had acute hypoxemic respiratory failure, which if you look it up, it's a lack of oxygen, and it's not a good thing. And so they started treating me right away. When the results came back on that Saturday, I had already been isolated 5 days. I had already been treated with significant health care for it. And that was, 19 days ago or 10 days ago. So I'm in the 17th day, I guess, or 16th day.
Wow. Okay. And so at this point in time, and just help me, one last thing, not to drag this out any longer, but you decided to come back to Georgia, and what was the reason? Just when the stay at home or stay in place order came into effect yesterday, you knew that was maybe coming? I don't know why not just stay there if you were already there? You know what I mean?
I understand. So with the controversy we had in Florida, obviously there are a lot of fears. There's no way that I was going to help that community and calm their fears when the Governor DeSantis put in his order that went to 30 days. That simply sends another message to that community that they've got a long way to go, right? Our state up here, Governor Kemp put in an extension to mid-April, right? And so it made sense for us to, instead of be held up for 30 days and figure out how to go another 16 days with supplies, and or to in any way maybe distract from what really needs to be the focus, and that is the healthcare of people that maybe are contracting it, and then the resources and medical team that need to be focused on it. I don't want to be that distraction at all, Adam. I certainly wanted to come back with our family. It was a family decision, a medical decision we consulted with, and they said, why don't you come back here? You've got a building, you can walk the stairs and stay out of the hall, and let's just do that as a secondary, and we'll keep you on track. So that was a decision.
Okay.